Hello and welcome to Crafting Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I'm one of your hosts. Every week we bring you interviews of makers of all kinds from all over the world, those that identify as female or non-binary. One of this week's guests is Thelma Kennedy, and Thelma is a lover of all projects. She is a self-described small-town part-time woodworker that hates sanding, probably like most of us, and is always looking for ways to improve her skill set. It all started with a needed drawer, which turned into what I will call power tool creep instead of project creep. And now she takes on commission work to fit into her day job schedule and is really enjoying working with her hands. So that is Thelma of TK Woodworking. And I had the pleasure of first meeting Thelma in person at Workbench Con and then getting to follow up with her for this interview. So very pleased to get to learn more about her story and how it influences her making. Before we hop into the interview with Thelma, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So thank you so much. Matthew from Artigiano Serio. Pretty sure that is correct. Candace from CJ Woodgrain, Lee Runyon, Annette 513 Woodworks, Katie Thompson, Women of Woodworking, Kevin, Lefty's Woodshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Jeremy Speece, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Rachel, Moody Makes, Bonnie, Tool Mom Bonnie, toolmomstore.com, Laura Oakley Soap Company, Brandy, Studio Obey, Lee, the Rainbow Carver, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued ongoing support, helping us to produce this podcast every week. And if you would like to help support the podcast, make sure you stick around to the end of the episode and I'll tell you how you can do that. All right, let's head into the conversation with Thelma. All right. Well, Thelma, I like to start by asking my guests to introduce themselves. Would you do that for me?
Absolutely. My name is Thelma Kennedy. I am the face behind TK Woodworking. I've been doing this for I think close to about 3 years. It started in a weird quest to figure out a way to kind of just fight my anxiety. I wanted something that when I came home from work, it kind of just became a stress reliever. Mm-hmm. And I, weirdly enough, found it in woodworking. I started with a project from my wife, which was this drawer with like multiple segments for her concealers and powders. I'm not too detailed. I just know they were like in just like a circular thing, and she just wanted all of them to be organized. So like all things, I could have just bought it and probably saved myself a lot of money. But no, I ended up going out and buying a miter saw that turned into buying a table saw that just turned into buying a whole bunch of expensive tools. Then I outgrew like this half of a 1-car garage because my wife would still park in it.
Yeah.
So I outgrew that, and I got lucky that the back of our house has a kind of just a shed that was wired already. So I moved all of my tools into a 7.5 by 21 foot shed, and that's where all my tools live now. So I
saw it. I mean, it still feels like it's like cramped.
But... Oh, absolutely. It's 100% cozy. And the funny part is that when I first started, I went to, it's called, it's run by Habitat for Humanity. Mm-hmm. And it's called like Restore to Home or Restore something. Mm-hmm. And I walked in because I remember when my parents had gotten one of their houses, we were remodeling it, and we didn't have the money to go out and buy like all like the expensive things from Home Depot. So we'll just go here.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, I'm going to go there to see if I can find anything, anything that could help, my woodworking adventures. And
Mhm.
I ended up running across a shopsmith.
Oh, yes.
And I was like, oh, this has like a lathe and like a bandsaw. So I got super excited. And the thing weighed so much and took up so much space that for a really long time, the majority of my shop was the shopsmith.
Yeah. Yeah. I had, I think the shopsmiths, like they were big back in their heyday was like the late 70s, early 80s is when their like heyday was. Though they're still actually like a legit company, like they still, make stuff. But I had never seen a shopsmith or heard of one either until I was in Southern California. And like I lived in this area because I was in Oceanside. The neighborhood I lived in, at least when we moved in, was like all these retired military people, because you have Camp Pendleton there and several other military bases right in the area. So it's all these retired, like old white dudes, and they had like their shops. And one of our neighbors, her husband had passed away like before we had even moved to the area, but she had like his shop was like in a pretty decent sized building they had built out in their yard, and it was just like sitting there full of all his tools. Like she just had all this stuff. And so when I started getting like really getting into woodworking, she was like, well, go take a look, and she's like, we'll work out like a deal, a decent price for everything. So he had a shopsmith and I bought it. And I'm trying to think, I think I only used it twice. And I used I put the discs on for sanding on the blade for the table saw part. So I used it for sanding. That was it. But it had like all the attachments. It had the jointer attachment. It had the bandsaw attachment. It had all of it. But as I went to community college there for their woodworking program. And like, I remember talking to one of my first teachers. He's like one of my favorites, still in contact. But I was like, I got this shopsmith. And he was like, oh God. He was like, no, walk away now. He's like, you cannot do precision woodworking on that thing.
I got the same response. Like I think I was just so excited to have so many of the tools that I knew that I needed in one machine.
Right.
I'm on the same page as you. I think I used it twice. And that shop has its own breaker box. And it would flip the breaker just by itself. Like it would flip the breaker. And for comparison, I run my DeWalt, I call it the lunchbox planer, the yellow one. I run that one and that doesn't flip my breaker ever. So I don't know what it was trying to pull, but it kept flipping my breaker. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. So, that's where I took on the approach. And as I'm thinking about it and about to say it, I mean, I know it's a nice privilege to have, but it was that mentality of buy once, cry once. So I'm like, if I know that I'm going to end up replacing it within the next 2 years, it's not worth buying. Like, unless it's for like a job that I need it now and the job's going to pay for it, then that's fine. But if it's something for me, I want things to last.
Absolutely. So I moved that damn thing with us back to Iowa. Like it was like it was like the heaviest paperweight ever. And my wife's just like, will you please sell that thing and just get rid of it? And I did eventually, once we were back in Iowa, I sold it, but I was just like, same thing. I mean, once I pivoted though to power carving, I really don't have like a lot of the standard, pieces of equipment. But you're saying your DeWalt doesn't blow the breaker. I blew the breaker yesterday running my DeWalt for the first time, but I was also on the same circuit running the my Grizzly dust collector right off of, I had it hooked up, so it was taking right off the planer. And then I had my room dust collector all on the same circuit. And it didn't blow while I was using it, thank goodness, which was interesting to me. It blew like I shut off everything because I was figuring out an issue. And then I realized like the plug wasn't working. I was like, well, that's interesting. Like it waited to blow until I turned everything off.
At least it was polite enough to wait until you were done using it. Like, oh, okay, you're done. I think I'm ready.
Yeah. And we have to talk about like how expensive did that drawer end up being? Is it like a $2,000 drawer because of all the equipment you bought for it?
It ended up running. Yeah, I think maybe not. I mean, close, but yeah, about that, because that's when I started. I went to Lowe's and met the nicest lady. Her name was Debbie. And if you needed a hype woman to help you buy tools, that lady was it. So
she was good at selling tools.
Yeah, she was really good at selling tools. So like I walked into Lowe's and I walked in with Heather. Heather's my wife. So we walk in, we're talking to Debbie, and she's just like this awesome lady who opened up and just kind of just told us her story. That she also does woodworking, and she used to do construction with her late husband, and she told us all about that and how it's just a way kind of to remember him. And I just like the whole story, like just it hit like in a way like where I'm just like, man, like you are a strong woman. Like so I already liked her, and she was great at selling power tools. So I walk out with table saw, and then the next couple days I went back for a drill and an impact drill and the other just a regular drill, and then I went back because I needed a router. Like it was just, yeah, so it was pretty close to like about $2,000. And they were just they're half lap strips. Like it wasn't supposed to be anything fancy, right? And in time I'm like, I know I have to do like these repeatable cuts. Because I tried, it's called a blade runner, I think is what it's called. And you put a jigsaw in a slot. And this is in my mind during the time, like, this is how I'm going to make the little grooves where it overlaps. Like, I got this. So I bought it, I put the jigsaw in there, and it like destroyed like this 1/4 inch like ply. And this is not going to work. No. Like, this is really not going to work. So then that's when I got the table saw. And I remember being so scared to use it. I didn't grow up around like any woodworking tools at all. I mean, my dad was a mechanic. So I was used to being around big tools, like, and I know it could translate to the same. You respect them the same. Yeah. That kind of stuff, but like never a blade saw, like at the right potentially like losing fingers, like it would scare me. So I'm like, okay, are you ready today? Like, yeah, no, not today. So it took me a while to feel comfortable enough to use my table saw, and I've since then just like started making things. I've since then upgraded the contractor saw to a Laguna cabinet saw, and it's quieter. I know. So yeah,
everybody, I mean, go to Thelma's house. I see how it is.
Right. I mean, like, I know that, I mean, I can't hide being on this podcast, so my wife may hear it. And she'll start hearing all these tools that I bought, and then I'll be that meme. Like, I hope my wife doesn't sell my tools for what she heard me say they were. Like, but yeah, like that's essentially like with every project I take on, I take commission work because I do have a full-time job. I manage a Starbucks really close to my house, so a lot of my woodworking is done after work. So I get to take and pick and choose commission. I get to be picky. Because it all comes back to the fact that I want to continue to be happy doing what I'm doing, because like I mentioned before, it's a way for me to relieve stress and
Mhm.
anxiety that builds up throughout my day, and it just keeps me sane. So I
Yeah.
want it to stay that way.
Yeah. No, I have so much maybe newly remembered respect for the person working full time and then like making on, evenings and weekends for a very long time. For probably the first 4 years of my business, I've had another job always, but usually it was more flex where it wasn't a full 40 hours. So I would get time, because really the reality for me anyways is, with 2 kids at home, I don't get to, I mean, they're getting older now where it's like right now, they're in front of screens. That's the babysitter. But, before then, it's like they have to be at daycare or nothing's happening. Like there's just not anything going to happen. Um, and so now, like my other job, like just based on contracts and stuff, I'm working like 40 plus hours a week. And so I'm like doing work on weekends and uh, evenings. And I've built over the past few years, built all the social media up. And so now I'm like it's stressing me out that I'm not being able to like show up as regularly as I was on social media, because I'm like, no, it's like finally growing and I need to like keep it up. And like, it's like all those things. And the fact that like somebody commissioned me for shelves, 3 of them, and is just having me make one right now. And it's taken over 6 weeks just because I haven't had the time to do it. And I just keep apologizing. I'm so sorry. Like this thing should not take this long to do. But so I have a new respect for the whole like side hustle aspect of it. And it also, at least personally, I'm with you on the stress relief. If I've had a few weeks here because of the schedule where it's like I haven't physically done anything with my hands, and I'm very grumpy. Like I'm just very grumpy.
Like, in my head, I always ask myself, like, when makers go on vacation, like, do they start to feel antsy? I'm like, because in my mind, I'm like, I do.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm enjoying my vacation. It's
Right.
fun, but all I could think about is like my shop. Like I like, and
are you having like sexy night dreams about your shop? Like I can hear like the background music now coming in.
Yeah, and it's just right, like just like slow dimming lights as I walk into my shop. But no, like I'll be out, like if I usually like my like days off or like vacation-y type days, or like 3 to 4 days is what I take, and like by like the third day I'm like, I need to be doing something. And then that's why, and I've always been like this. I was a hyperactive child. Like I got into everything and anything. Like I was probably like a parent's first child nightmare.
And they have further? That's the real question.
That what?
Did they have more?
Yes. So I saw a funny TikTok that said, if you think you're your favorite, then why did your parents have additional kids? Like, but yeah, I have a brother and a sister, George and Jacqueline. George and I are about 3.5 years apart. Okay. And my sister and I are close to like almost 10 years apart. Okay. So I get along with both of them, but growing up, I definitely did not get along with my brother. We beefed all the time. We were always going at it, and we drove my mom insane. And it's because we did a lot of like the similar things, because as a child, like I was such a huge tomboy. And it's funny saying it out loud, because as a kid, I hated when people called me that. Mm-hmm. Like I hated going to school, but the thing, like I would show up to school in like shorts and a shirt because I wanted to be comfortable enough to play soccer and football during recess. Right. And I would get so mad when it would rain, because I'm like, if it rains, I can't go outside and I can't go play. Like it just, like that was the highlight of me going to school, was being able to like play like any sport that was on TV. Like that was what I would get to play during school. And when it rained, that wasn't going to happen. Yeah.
Now, please tell me you knew at an early age that your path would lead to having a wife, because I'm just saying all of those breadcrumbs right there is screaming.
Right? 100%. And I think it was one of those things like it was weird because I came out probably at like 20, 21, and I was older. And I don't want to say that I came out as an accident because it wasn't. I think all in all, it was just me wanting to express who I really was and not knowing how. But so a little background, I was actually born in Mexico. I was born in Ensenada, which is about, I want to say maybe about 40 minutes away from San Diego.
Okay.
It is,
So is it close then to Tijuana?
yes, it's about like 20-25 minutes from TJ.
Okay.
It's the port city, so if a lot of people have taken cruises, the cruise ship will stop in Ensenada, and then people will get off the cruise ship and get to explore and go down what we call La Primera, which is First Street, and like go to Papa's and Beer and Husong's and like all these places. So that's where I grew up. Except I grew up in a tiny trailer right by the beach. My dad had like his own little like kind of just mechanic shop. My mom stayed home, and that's just after like a bit, my parents had, just this plan of, coming to the United States and, building a life here. And so I grew up in Visalia. So all of that, like I grew up Catholic, I got confirmed, I was baptized, I did my first communion. So like I was like raised like hardcore Catholic, and my parents were like hardcore, like we're immigrants, and like all those fundamentals that you hear like about like Hispanic and like Latin American families, like they're very strong to like their ideals. And I think part of me was in denial for a really long time. And part of me was really afraid of,
real.
Of acknowledging that this is who I am as an individual. And like, I have to share it. Like, I can't keep it to myself. So I was sitting outside with my dad having a conversation. And I think I ended up saying something along the lines of like, Dad, I think I'm gay, and I think I like women. And my dad turns and looks at me. And at the same time, my mom walks out of the slider door, steps outside, looks at me, and she's like, what do you mean? And like, that's what I meant. Like I was so afraid of telling my mom that I was so much more comfortable telling my dad. But I got a 2-for-1 special because my mom came out, and I ended up telling her, and like that led down like I'd say like a hard path. But I was lucky enough that even with those like hardcore like fundamentals of like how she was raised, the whole like experience of when people come out to their parents and their parents unfortunately not speaking to them, that lasted maybe like 6 months. That my mom and I, like, it was just weird. But afterwards, like, it's hard to explain, but my mom did a complete 180, and I could not be like more proud of like how she handled it from like that moment on. She turned, she looked at me, and she said like, she's all like, I've been trying to get like help. I've been talking to people. I've been trying to be knowledgeable about everything. She's like, and one of the things that they made me realize is what you told me doesn't change who you are. You're still the same person, and you're still my daughter. And I'm still like, she's like, and I will love you the exact same way that I did before. And we have like a totally different relationship than we did growing up, because growing up, all we did was fight all the time. So like now we'll do like a lot of things together, and I'm just really happy that she handled it the way that she did. And but yeah, it was definitely an adventure.
Today's episode is sponsored by Athena Outfitters. Athena Outfitters is a quality workwear brand for hardworking women that sells everything badass beauties need to get the job done, from work boots to basics. They curate the toughest essentials made to help you perform, every piece is handpicked to seamlessly slide right into your daily lifestyle, from rugged and roguish weekday wear to effortless weekend flair. You can fill your closet with gear that can do it all. So for Christmas, I ordered my wife like a very nice pair of slippers from Athena Outfitters, and she loves them. Loves them so much that she has accidentally gone to the gym and the grocery store in them because they seem to never leave her feet. So definitely a place to go check out, go get the goods that help you not only out in the shop, but just in your daily work around the house and outdoors. As a listener of the podcast, you can go to Athena Outfitters website and use coupon code M as in M&Ms 15 for 15% off any purchase. So again, you go to athenaoutfitters.com and use the code MM15 and get 15% off of your purchase at checkout. Yeah, I grew up Lutheran, which is really just slightly lower than Catholic. Like they're very similar. Very similar. And my stepdad's a Lutheran minister and stuff. So like yeah, I waited to way later in life to come out. I think I was 27 when I came out to them. Like my friends all knew, and I had girlfriends. It was a dual life, which sucked a lot. But I also dealt with probably about the same amount of time, about 6 months of like mine, since I was like an adult with a capital A and lived in my own space. At the time, it was no talking at all, which was odd for me. I wish I could say my parents came around the way yours did. They have not. They have eventually gotten to a place of peace. I think having kids kind of helped with that. I know a lot of it was like a fear of like, well, you won't get to live a quote unquote normal life with having getting married and having a family, all of that stuff. But I did. So it's like, nope, it's just looks maybe slightly different, but not really. We still go to the grocery store. We still fight with each other. We still kids drive us nuts. Like all of that stuff, still the same.
Exactly. And I think it was weird because I think later on, like my mom ended up like revealing things too. And she's like, I realized that a lot of it was about me, and it shouldn't have, because all I could think about was like you not walking down the aisle in a white dress and like this whole like typical Catholic wedding. Yeah. And she's like, and then I realized like, but you're with someone, and I think it did help that she met Heather and fell in love with her. Because my wife is probably one of like the sweetest people that you will ever meet. She has such a huge heart, and she won my mom over. And that was in my mind. I was just like, I can't believe you made that happen. Like my mom loves you. And my mom ended up saying, she's all like, it's because I can see in her eyes how much she loves you. And then she's like, and as long as you're happy, I'm happy. And like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like the mom that I had like a couple of years ago, like I never thought like this was going to happen, because my mom was very like, like a lot of people, she cared what other people thought. And then she got to a point where she's all like, you know what? No, like you don't pay my bills. Like, my family makes me happy. Like, so she ended up like, she ended up choosing, I know it sounds weird, but she ended up choosing her family over what people thought. And I'm super grateful for that, is because, now we have such a nice relationship. Heather will go over to my parents' house, and like everything feels right. Yeah. Like it doesn't feel like I have to be someone else when I'm at my parents' house.
Which is awesome. Yeah, which is awesome. I don't know if you're okay talking a little bit about, we kind of talked a little bit before the recording, but also because I got to meet you in person at Workbench and you came to the panel and stuff. I'm just curious, like, when it comes to social media, you talked a little bit about that, like fear of, showing yourself. Does that go to the extent of like showing full self in that space?
Yeah. When I first started woodworking, I was afraid to show my face, period.
Mhm.
So that was like my first fear. I took communication in college, but obviously like that didn't help because I was always afraid to be on camera. I always had this phobia of hearing myself. And I'm like, that's what I sound like. And I think all of it was just, it was all in my head, like
Mhm.
100%. So I would have like these angles where all you could see was my hands and like
Yep.
me touching things, but you'd never see my face. And then I realized like, but people aren't getting to see the face behind the things that I make. So I started showing like my face a lot more and started doing stories and
Mhm.
being like my weird, quirky self. And then I ran into like a second dilemma. And that second dilemma being a lot of the people who I saw around me were, and not that it's a problem. It's like a
Right.
lot of the people that I saw woodworking were all like older white dudes.
Mhm.
I had a really like tough time like navigating trying to find other women who did
Mhm.
woodworking. And when I did, I was like, oh, follow.
Right.
Like, because I'm like, there's another woman like empowered to like
Right.
build things with tools. Like, and I was excited. And the second dilemma was trying to find other people that I could relate to, in the sense of like, I don't want all my friends to be gay, but like I wanted to have like
Yeah.
to see other like women who like we shared same experiences
Yeah.
doing what I was doing. And I had like, I wasn't like, do I do it first? Do I like let other people know that I'm gay? Like, what will like people think of me? And then I just like, I felt like I just slapped myself in the face and I was like, you spent way too long hiding who you really were from the world. Don't start over again.
Mhm.
Don't go there. And like, you are happy just the way that you are. Why are you going to go back to not showing your authentic self every day
Mhm.
on video? So I started, like openly talking about my wife and the fact that like behind the scenes, like she does a lot,
Mhm.
and including her in my stuff, in my stories. Like when we're not woodworking, sometimes we're in the kitchen making stuff together. And I was like, that's part of who I am. That's part of my
Right.
life. And I want to share that. And I told myself, if there's people who don't want to see that, that's okay too. Like,
Mhm.
you don't have to be a part of this.
Right.
Like, this is
Right.
my space that I'm sharing, with the rest of the world. So,
Well, and I think, at least for me, like I said at the panel, like I didn't, for the first couple of years, I didn't share at all anything about my wife. I would share about my kids occasionally. I would talk about them in stories, because when you become a parent, you lose identity with all of yourself. So you have to talk about our kids. But beyond that sad fact, I didn't, until she kind of brought up to me about her her feelings, that I basically was like erasing her from this big part of my life. Um, and it's sad that it took that from her, for me to be like, oh shit, like I need to correct that. But even then, when I like kind of started bringing it up, I didn't do that a lot. Part of that was fear, because I do have people that like follow my social media that are part of my, you know, day job life. And I am not always open and out in that life, because I do find myself in a lot of true small town. And I know you will get that joke, true small town, rural like places, manufacturing places. And quite frankly, I don't feel safe enough to be out in those spaces. And I have the privilege of passing when I want to. Um, and so knowing that, and knowing they followed my social media, there was fear there too, right? Of like, what's going to happen. And to be frank, like it wasn't even on social media that gave me like the final push. It was this realization. At the time, my family and I were going to a Methodist church, and there was and still is this big fight that the Methodist church started essentially hunting down the queers. And so I my church that we belonged to was kind of fighting back, and so it ended up being like a local news story. And I got a call and was like, hey, can you come to the church for a news story? And I was like, yeah, I'll just, I just came and like did it. And then I realized afterwards, like, oh shit, like I just like across my entire region told everybody I was gay. Like shit. And then for my job, like I was going into spaces like the following few days and people being like, I saw you on the news. Good. Like, okay, moving along. And that was like, so not social media at all, but that was just like, it was almost like a huge relief. Like, okay, everybody knows now. So there's like no hiding it. And I kind of just went like full in on it, with like Instagram and stuff. And I will say, I feel like, especially over the last year or so, it's like I've had so many like new queer followers, and it's like amazing, like because it's just like I get messages and stuff of like, just thank you for using your voice and being out there and being proud and like sharing all this stuff. And I'm okay with being like the queer Pied Piper. I will do that. It's like, bring them all to me, bring them all.
It is like it has to feel good, like to be able to be that voice for so many people. And I know that it's not the same, but because for a huge like part of my life, like I was fighting with that, and the fact that like I shared like I wasn't born here. So
right.
my parents we came to the United States when I was 4. My dad had we all had like passports and visas, and
Yep.
we were supposed to be tourists, and we overstayed our welcome by a lot. And we stayed here, and we got the title of like of immigrants. And
Yeah.
I didn't realize what that meant, but in the town that I live in, although it's not a true small town, the mentality is of one of a small town.
Yeah.
So a lot of people in around the city, it's getting better, but growing up it was like very, very different. And being an immigrant, I heard all kinds of things, and I had no voice. Because when I found out what it really meant being an immigrant, I was just like, oh shit, like, okay. So my parents would be like, you don't speak Spanish anywhere. If anybody asks, you were born in San Diego, like you don't give them reasons to keep asking questions.
Yes.
So I cleared up and tried really hard, because Spanish was my first language, to not let any accent whatsoever ever escape my mouth, because I had to speak proper English to not, raise any red flags. Because during that time period, it was like, if you know of someone who's an immigrant, call immigration.
Yeah.
And
call ICE.
Exactly. And then they would deport you. And that was my biggest fear, was being separated from my family. So I went to school hearing like, my classmates and people around me say some really effed up stuff.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, that's not true. Like in my head, I'm like, I can't say anything, because then they're going to be, well, how do you know?
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, I can't tell them how I know. Like, I'm one of the people that they're making fun of.
Yeah.
And it's just not being able to stand up for yourself and other people is why the minute I became a resident, I'm all like, no more.
Yep.
Like anytime like I hear, nope, that's not true. And let me tell you why, if you want to have an open discussion about it. if I know that it's not going to change your mind one way or another, and you could tell, like, a couple sentences into a conversation, like, you have your mindset and there's nothing that I can do to change it. And I'm not wasting, any more time trying to like get it across because you don't want to understand.
Yeah.
So I was like, nope, anytime I can, like, I will be like the voice for people who don't have one, who are stuck in that same situation that I have, because it's a really bad place to be in, to fear so many things, because fear itself sucks.
Yes. Yes,
so that's why, and that's one of the reasons why when I started woodworking, I'm all like, no, like, there's other people fighting that same dilemma out there. And I know that I'm not going to reach everybody, but at least for the people who come across my channel, like, will know, like, this is who I am. And it's okay to be you doing what you do.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with it. And, and it's just, to be that voice is just, it, in a way, like, it's just,
it's still one of those things though, of like, I'm glad that you're in a space that you can be not only your own voice, but help be the voice of others who still are without one. I still feel like, though, it's really the responsibility of those who look like me to make waves in that like arena. Do our own homework, do our own, like, all of that stuff, do things like, I mean, like, as you're talking and realizing you're in California, I keep thinking, which I don't know if it's a children's book, but I keep thinking about this book that we picked up, Separate is Never Equal. And it's about actually one of the first segregation lawsuits in the country. And it was in California. And it wasn't in the 60s. I think it was in the 40s. It was in California. And it was because of all of the Mexican migrant workers, they, like, all their children would be sent to the Mexican school, which was basically like usually a shack on a dirt road with, like, it was horrible. It was horrible conditions, and it wasn't conducive to learning at all. And so there was, like, I want to say 3 families, I think, that went to the Supreme Court and won. About everybody being able to go to the school, like, in their neighborhood, which just makes sense now, right? Like, we don't even question that. But learning, even just through that children's book, like, reading it with my kids and going, oh my God, like, the thing showing the signs saying, like, no dogs and no Mexicans allowed. And I'm just like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, I don't like, I get so mad because I think I get so mad because I just can envision, like, what I will never understand is how people don't have empathy. How can you not put yourself, like, just to pause and go, what if that was me? What if that was my kids? What if it's like any of these other people that you massively care for? What if that was what they were facing? Like, I don't understand how that's not enough to stop people from doing these things.
now that you mentioned that, I had, in high school, I had a teacher. Her name was Mrs. Barnes, and I'll never forget her because she was probably one of the realest teachers that I had, and she was honest one day. And every time, like, I can now, I'd share, like, my story about, growing up and just how it's a little different, growing up as an immigrant. Like, you don't get to do the things that most people perhaps may take for granted, like driving and, just little things like that. And in high school, there were the reforms of, like, trying to kind of just, now we have what's called DACA, which is it's a kind of just like a permit for immigrants to be able to work if they qualify and go to school and pay in-state tuition, and, like, it helps a little bit towards school, not a lot, but just stuff like that. And we were working towards that. And she was hearing all these things, and then she's all like, I can safely say that I don't know. And it's kind of like, she was like, shame on me, but to be honest, like, a lot of people don't care about it when it's not in their backyard.
Yeah,
that's what she said. And I'm like, that's so true, because we tell ourselves like, how can people not have
Yeah.
empathy? But the thing is, like, when it doesn't directly affect them, like they don't think about it too much. They're like,
But that's the thing that boggles my mind. Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag Woodworker on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action. So like, I will say, especially on the, Latinx, Latino, Hispanic, like front of like immigration, I will say I have always been a voice against the stupidity of white people when it comes to that. And that's because, like, especially like in high school, I've lived so much of my life in places that have meatpacking plants, which means there is a strong Hispanic, Latinx, Latino, like workforce there.
there's a
And
handsome
so-
guy with a mustache,
Yes.
a really nice one working.
And so it's like, I lived in these communities and I would see the disparity between the communities. And then I hear the things from even some of my own family members, and I would get so upset that even like in a lot of these places that I work now for my, job, which is manufacturing, which again preys on people who may not be here legally, to be able to get by with cheap labor, which is horrendous. Like these places, I mean, my first job out of school was for Hormel Foods, and I'm not ashamed to mention them because they were horrible. And they, just the way that everybody who was in management was white, every single person. And I was one of only 4 women out of 400 people in management at the plant I was at. So pretty much all white men. And like, I remember my first day on the job, I was an industrial engineer, which meant at that location, I got to do time studies, which means I get to go out with the time watch, time people doing their job. And I'm trying to look at how do I shave off a couple seconds from what they're doing so that we can get, more money for that piece of meat that's coming off the line. And watching this and like hearing people talk, like, oh, like 95% of our workforce doesn't speak English. And like talking about like how they're being looked at as like lazy, or they don't do a good job, or all of these things. And I'm like, really? Because I see them killing it out there. And the 5% that are old white men out on this floor are lazy, obnoxious human beings that I never want to see ever again in my life. Like, I was just so, I was within the system and constantly still fighting against the system. Maybe why I didn't last there very long, but I was just so enraged. And like how I point out to people, like, you think it doesn't affect you. However, there's almost no white hands that produce food in this country. Almost none. Like, it's negligible. And if you got your way and you send people where you think they're all from back to Mexico, which, hello, there's also a lot of Latin countries in this world. But if you send people back to where you think they come from, we will have no food in this country. Like, none.
Absolutely. And I agree. Like, I try to look at it as like there are a lot of hardworking people in this world, and a lot of it is just like our fundamentals of like, we're very heavy on family. So whatever it takes to make sure that there's food on the table, like that is the number one priority. So like growing up, like same thing, like we didn't have a lot. My dad was a mechanic, we're not from here. So he tried really hard to be, and I know honest and mechanic usually never are in this, like are brought up in the same sentence. But my dad said, I want to be able to help other people who don't have a lot of money that, unfortunately stuff like this happens. Their car breaks down, they need to get to work. So I watched like my dad like bust his ass every single day. And I would be like, Dad, like you're not even charging them what you're supposed to.
Right.
Like, I know. He's all like, but like he would say things like, but he told me his story and like how, he's struggling and all this stuff. I'm like, oh, Dad. I'm all like, and that's when I realized like my dad has a huge heart.
Yeah.
And like he enjoys like helping people. So as I'm like, I see like a lot of like of him in me. And I'm just like, that's why, like, my dad is just like kind and like humane, and he wants to leave the world a better place than he found it in. And that's coming from someone who also dealt with like getting the shit end of the stick a lot of the time. And his response was like, I'm not responsible for them. I'm responsible for me. And I just want to be, kind to the people that I meet, because that's a direct reflection of me. And I was like, oh, that's so true, because my poor dad, I've watched him get scammed, and I'm just like, oh, Dad. But growing up, I didn't work at a meat plant, but I worked at a furniture store, and that was it. I wasn't able to work here, but I was going to school, and this was before DACA. So one day I get a phone call because I got accepted to Cal State Northridge, and I was going to live in the dorms, but that lasted maybe 2 months because then we couldn't afford it. And my parents called me and they're all like, we're really sorry. We were trying really hard, but we can't make this work. So you have to figure out a way. And during that time, like I wasn't very knowledgeable about like any help, any scholarship. So I paid for the majority of my school out of pocket, like working like multiple jobs while going to school full time. And my parents still help as much as they could, but I worked at this furniture store and I got paid less than minimum wage. And I remember I'm like, well, work is work, and I need to pay for textbooks and gas and rent. And finally, when DACA came about, like it was just a sigh of relief. And you would pay $500 every 2 years to renew it. And it was so I would be able to work legally in the US and get in-state tuition. So Starbucks was actually the first company who gave me a job. And Starbucks is extremely open. Their motto is you come and you be your authentic self at work. And I appreciated that. I'm all like, I'm getting paid a little bit more than minimum wage. Like, and they're nice to me. And I get 2 breaks and a lunch. Like I have it set. Like I was so excited. And I mean, a lot of people, I don't know, maybe like their first job, but I was just so excited that I got 2 breaks and a lunch. Like I get, this is fun. Like I had a blast, and I actually still work for them, take an absence to work a corporate job, which I hated. And I went back to Starbucks again, and it's like the same thing. Like I get to be my
totally
authentic
explains why I got to watch you like be the barista for people at Workbench Con. I was like, she's got like the skills, like she's working the like multiple drinks coming back at one time. She's got it.
The shaker flips and all that stuff. Like it was fun. And I think part of the reason why I love my job is because I get to interact with so many people every single day and like have conversations and learn about their story and help develop, because we call our employees our partners because they get shares of the company through stock. So we're all called partners, and I get to kind of help mentor them, even if they don't want to stay with Starbucks, like kind of just be good human beings, and wherever they end up, they are good human beings there. So I enjoy what I do, and I'm lucky that I'm in that place because it was totally different like beforehand. And I'm happy. And it's just, I look back and I'm just like, I'm just grateful for like the opportunity to like now be a part of the United States, to have like to be able to do all the things that everybody else gets to do while they're here.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that the rest of us shouldn't take for granted. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, since you started woodworking, has that grown like a different type of relationship with your dad? Like, since you're both kind of like this hands-on, like,
both my mom and my dad have grown. When I was younger, my dad would tell me, because I would ask him, like, Dad, I want to learn how to change like oil. Like,
yeah,
I want to learn how to do some of the things that you do. And he said, like, why do you want to learn this? I'm like, and that's always been the person who I am. Like, I just like learning new things, period. And I'm like, well, I want to learn how to do it. So like, well, I expect that once you get very like macho response, that when you're older, like you don't have to do stuff like this. Other people will do it for you. And it's because, they grew up doing everything on their own, that like in their mind, how like success is other people doing things for you. And he wouldn't let me touch like any tools. And like my mom was the same way. I played soccer most of my life, but I fought with her to start playing because she said it was a man's sport. So like you can kind of see that growth there. And now my dad's like, do you think you can make a sign for my shop? And I'm like, absolutely. So like I framed up like a new sign because he ended up moving, got a new shop. He's been in my shop and he like looks at things and I can kind of feel like the little kid in him. He's like, I used to take wood shop as like when I was going to school, and I know what that is, and I know what that is. And he's just so excited. I told him, like, you have to help me build like a dog house, just like to find a project that I could actually do.
Yeah.
But instead he's all like, no, but what I do need help is if you can install some swamp coolers in the wall. Well, like, sure, Dad, whatever you need. But it's definitely it's different now.
Yeah.
And it's nice to get to share, like, because he works with his hands every day. So like he sees me doing it, and I'm pretty sure part of like his heart gets like a little warm because like, yeah, like, you're doing stuff like that too. Because my brother's the complete opposite. Like my brother is extremely smart, and he will find like methodical ways to not work as hard. And I'm over here like, I just enjoy doing it, period. And he's like, nope, that's not for me. Like, I have no patience whatsoever. And the funny part is that he's a math teacher in high school. I'm like, you have to have a lot of patience to work with kids. Yes. I'm like, but you don't have patience to come woodwork with me.
Yeah, it's my oldest, he's all into like video games, and he's super, super smart and very like, thought provoking stuff, conversations with him. And then it's my daughter who's like, what are you doing in the shop today? I want to help. What are you doing?
Awesome though.
So it's like, it's always fun. Like, yeah, from my oldest, I'll get a list of like, Mom, this is what I want. Can you make it? And from my youngest, it's like, this is what I want, but can I help you make it? That's like always her key negotiation tactic, right? It's like she'd rather help make it, which is all good. It takes a lot more patience when you're working with somebody who's really tiny. Like deep breaths, calm down. It will not be perfect, and that will be okay. But yeah, I think I wish I had somebody like more in my family that I could really like. I keep trying to get, my sisters are so much younger than me. They're almost 17 years younger than me, and they're twins. And they both now, well, one owns a house with her husband and the other is house hunting. And I'm like, yes, because then I can talk you into some home projects, and then we can like finally have something to talk about together, because they're both like only because I love them, I wore a dress and heels for their like weddings. Like, I mean, and I still fought them very hard on that fact. But it's like they're so far on the extreme, like the other side of me. Like we've never really had anything to like share in common besides like a parent. So like, yes, let's demo that wall. Yes, great idea. Let's do that together.
know. I feel your pain. I got excited when my little sister was born because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have, like a little sister and all this stuff. And my sister's like the complete opposite of who I am as a person. Like my
Yes.
sister, makeup and dresses and
Yes.
all this stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, we literally have nothing in common. And then the only thing we have in common is music.
Yes.
Like because she grew up hearing like the music that I would like bump when I was cleaning.
Yeah.
And she'll like periodically tell me, like, do you remember? And a little embarrassing, like, do you remember when you used to bump like Coldplay? And I was just like, yep, I remember. Or she'll bring up like albums that I would listen to, and I was just like, yep. She's like, yep, thanks to you, that's why I like these artists. And like music is one of the things that we have in common, but building for sure is not. My brother also purchased a home and I got excited, but his home was newer, so there really wasn't anything to remodel. But his dog chewed up the molding around his door, so I got to fix that, and that was a first for me.
I mean, I had to I just went and saw, I went to my one sister's house, which is fairly new to them. And like, they had bought all this furniture and they had bought it from a maker who I don't know their name, but they were selling stuff through Amazon. And I was like, you literally, and then and she was like, and then we were like, she was showing it to me, and like, being able to like school her on because she's like, yeah, I don't know what to do to like protect it. And I was like, you have a woodworker in your family and you didn't maybe I need to make this more clear.
Yeah, I feel that pain.
Yeah.
I feel that pain when my mom she ended up buying those, I don't know how to explain them. They look like farm tables.
Yeah.
She bought one and I told her, I'm like, I could have made one for you.
Right.
And she's like, well, I know wood's really expensive right now. And I only got this for like $80. And I'm looking at this table. I'm like, I can see why.
Yes.
Like, I'm like, but it's okay. I'm all like, I get you. You were trying to save, like me some money. Cause I mean, I don't charge my parents to make them things.
Right.
Like I just do it. And I'm like, I get it.
I do get it on my sister's end to a degree. Like they both still are owed wedding presents from me. They each like picked out something for me to make for them. So they're still owed that. But it is next on the list. So I do get that fact. But yeah, like explaining, like I had the opposite with my sister. I asked her how much she paid for the tables, and I won't share how much because it was like a ridiculous amount. And I was like, what? They said you paid that for pine. For stained pine. You paid that price for stained pine. I was like, talk to me next time.
Out of ash. You can't even get out of hardwood.
Yes. Well, that's what I was like. She's like, well, what's so wrong about pine? And I was like, you just told me you had to send the initial top back twice because of dents and dings to it. That's what's wrong with pine.
It's a softwood.
Yes.
You put your fingernail in it and it indents into the wood.
Yeah, so she's like sitting here talking about like she wants these to be like heirloom pieces. I was like, oh no. I said, if you guys decide to have kids, you wait until they're out of the stage of like, stabbing the fork into the table before you get something that's nice. And then you come talk to me and we will work through what hardwoods you need to order.
So long as they're not like my mom. I made her a butcher block and she doesn't use it because she doesn't want to scratch it. And I'm like, that is literally the whole entire point of this butcher block is for you to actually use it. And she's like, I know, but it's too nice to cut into. I'm like, I can resand it and refinish it for you. Like, please use it.
That's actually my wife. There's like so many things. Like she'll end up being like, she'll see me make it and I'll take it to a market or whatever. And then she'll buy it at the market. I was like, number one, you're my wife. Like I could have just been like, you want that? Here you go. Number two, like once she has it, it like stays in a cupboard to stay nice. And I'm like, the intent is for it to be used.
I think it's because you know why we grew up in the China generation. So like your parents had like it wasn't like for us it wasn't great China, but it was like the better plates that lived in the glass cupboard. So it's like you want to cherish things and not use them.
Yes, I get it. Well, Thelma, we're like at the end of our like podcast time together. So I want to give you a chance to let people know how they can like find you and follow along with you and get to see all the fun food you make with your wife, because that's what I'm really there for, is the fun food you guys make together.
So I don't have a YouTube channel. The majority of my content is on Instagram. It's tk.woodworking. You will see me there mostly in the afternoons. I usually don't post on Sundays because those are my personal days. But other than that, you will see me like making random stuff because that's just who I am. I kind of like identify myself a little bit with, you know, some makers who are like kind of jack of all trades, kind of like Joni. I love learning new things. So nothing in my channel is usually like repetitive. There are usually new things. So I also do like to cook Mexican food, grill pizza, and you can see all that in my stories, and you get to follow along with like my quirky, semi-funny self. So
I love it. I love it. And you know, I have learned from watching your stuff, like there's no way I could hang with you food wise. Like my Midwestern white ass could not hang with you food.
You know what? I thought I was gonna have like a similar problem with Heather in my mind, and my mom still does it to her. We'll go over to my parents' house, and my mom will go like, "Mija," and she'll say it in Spanish. She's all like, "Tiene chile," and like she'll be like that. It has like chili in it, and like that Heather's about to eat it, that I can't give it to her. And I'm like, Mom, like I wish you were there when she makes chilaquiles, because so you know my dad would cook on Sundays. That was just like our tradition, and he would make chilaquiles and he would make them from scratch. So Heather picked his brain, got the recipe, but then added more chilies to the chilaquiles sauce to make potatoes. So she would be like, I like chilaquiles, but I want them in potatoes. So she would put extra chilies to the point where I'm like, this is hot for me.
Right.
So I had to explain that to my mom, and like she can hang. Like she eats chili all the time. She puts it in her pozole. But yeah, like she loves like when we cook Mexican food, and I enjoy it because it's a part of like me growing up, the foods that I ate. So I get to share it with someone else. So you can see that in my stories too. I love food.
I will say I did have a slight increase of tolerance to spice. Like I used to be like, no spice. Like my wife can handle the spice, and she would be like, oh, this isn't spicy. And I would take a bite and I'd be like, I need to talk to somebody who has like no taste buds. This is spicy to me. But then like after I had my youngest, my daughter, like something about her pregnancy, like I was eating like super spicy wings from like Buffalo Wild Wings and stuff, like, and no problem. So it's gone up a little bit, but still, like, there's still a level of like, I can't hang when you start like throwing some chilies in. I'm like,
I have to though. Like we grow some like chilies and habaneros and all that stuff in the backyard, so they have to go to use.
That's okay. That's okay. I would just sweat a lot if I ate your food. Well, thanks so much for like chatting today. It's been fun.
It has. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed like getting to share a little bit about myself. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So again, that was Thelma Kennedy of TK Woodworking on Instagram. Great time chatting with her. You can find the link on how to follow along with her in the show notes for today's episode. And the best place to find those are in the description for the episode on your podcast app. If you happen to be watching this on the Freeman Furnishings YouTube channel, then check the description box down below. And you can head on over to freemanfurnishings.com/podcast and find today's episode as well as all the previous episodes. Like I kind of said at the beginning, if you are enjoying the podcast and would like to support it, there's several options to do that. So first, make sure you're following along with the podcast over on Instagram at Crafting a Revolution, and then hit the link in bio there and you can get to Patreon, so you can become a monthly ongoing supporter and get your name added at the start of the episode as a thank you. You can also, through that link, there's an option to do a one-time donation, and then there's several ways to help the podcast out without any funds at all. One being to share about the podcast, the other to make sure that you hit like and subscribe. And if you could leave a review, especially over on iTunes, all of that really helps the podcast out. Lets all those different algorithms know that people are enjoying it, and so they let more people know about it. And once you're over on Instagram following along with the podcast, which is Crafting a Revolution again, you might want to also say hi to your host. So you can say hi to me, Katie Freeman of Freeman Furnishings on Instagram, or say hi to Katie Thompson, Women of Woodworking, over on Instagram. So come on over and say hi. This is one of 2 new episodes this week, so we have one more coming up. And in the meantime, as always, let's go craft a revolution.
Got something they wanna say. Solution for the toxic masculinity. Pollution is the constant evolution of the